Explained by the Billy Meier contacts. Mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more. Compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
Music and Sound Part 1, Musica Universalis. Contact Report 042.
Do you also know music, literature, and art, and do you have appropriate schools?
Sure, these things are common to all human life forms in the universe. We also have appropriate schools for these things, but they can only be attended by really talented people who will later work in these things for the benefit of all. The interested parties are judged according to the presence of talent and admitted to the schools, so only real talents are admitted. There are therefore no such things as are customary on Earth, namely that performers appear in public who make ear-hurting sounds. I often find that very horrible when I listen to earthly music.
It is just barbarian music, some manslaughter, some blood, some death cry, squeaking, hysterical nagging, and some nonsense of supposed love and moldy romance. That's what the earthworm thinks. You must understand.
It is terrible, but all the more I am happy about the really good and harmonic earthly music, which has nothing to do with these sounds, which are often bad and unmusical.
You are right, but how does your music sound, and what kind of instruments do you have?
I cannot describe the music to you, because it would sound completely strange to you. Likewise, the instruments would be alien to you.
Contact Report 114.
A close study of the psyche of the individual group members has let me recognize that for the promotion of the meditation, and also in daily life and at meetings, a melodious background music would be of much value. This brought me to the idea to give you, in accordance with our model, the advice that especially for the meditation exercises and for the meetings of an internal form, you should bring a musical accompaniment into application, and I will strive for the suitable pieces of the earthly music area, according to which you can then procure these music pieces for yourselves.
Contact Report 155.
Man, sometimes the earth appears to me as the most bizarre madhouse. Even the joy of singing goes away in the process.
That is understandable, but it would be a great pity if you would destroy this joy of yours. Already often I have heard you sing, and one can really take pleasure in your singing. In fact, you would be competition for some professional singers.
Contact Report 169.
Yes, Svath even said this, explaining that language serves only for communication, and the communication contains only everything that is of a harmonious nature, which is why there are human races that only communicate with each other in song, musical form.
That is of correctness. Language is actually harmonious in itself, and so such a thing should also be expressed. In your ranks, you should at least consider being active at times in this form, namely with singing. This should be a duty with you, and you should introduce this under all circumstances as soon as possible.
You laugh, but I have already spoken about this several times at meetings and such. But so far, it has not borne any fruit yet.
It should be made a duty by an ordinal rule, because without this harmony, what is required will never be reached.
That is what I have often said in a similar manner, but it has been unsuccessful. There are simply group members who think that this is sectarian or unworthy for them, or even childish.
Such words and thoughts are very sad because even we, and still more highly developed humans, cannot help but be harmoniously active in this form, by which means also our feelings and thoughts, etc., become more peaceful, calmer, and also more affectionate.
This I can vividly imagine, especially since I have previously heard you singing rather often, together with several others, as well as alone.
Contact Report 208.
For my part, Svath taught me that there are various forms of human intelligence, and thus not just one type. Thus, he explained that there is an emotional intelligence, a thought-feeling intelligence, and a creative intelligence, along with a musical intelligence, an intellectual intelligence, an individual intelligence, and a general intelligence. Further, he also mentioned idea intelligence, fantasy intelligence, and character intelligence, as well as consciousness intelligence. But these are not all of the manifestations. All forms of intelligence taken together, namely in their full value, result in the actual intelligence quotient. The higher the quotient is, the more intense and the higher the speed of thought is, with the maximum speed of thought being the speed of light. And the higher the person's speed of thought and combination is, the higher his or her intelligence should be. This all seems clear and also logical to me, in complete contrast to the so-called IQ tests, which are made by pompous earthly psychologists, etc.
Contact Report 223.
You, as well as Pa and Simyase, once played the strange humming sounds of the earth to me through your apparatuses, which I cannot perceive in nature. Unfortunately, because my hearing senses are not so sensitive that I could hear these sounds, which should very well be possible for other people, however, as you have explained. The sources of these sounds are very diverse, as your cognition yields, and these or similar sounds should, according to your information, also appear on other worlds as well as on asteroids, comets, meteors, suns, and dark clouds, as well as with cosmic nebulae and even in every black hole, etc., so not only on the Earth. All electromagnetic waves, as well as the northern lights and solar winds, etc., belong to these sound sources. You named the sounds Symphony of the Earth, or Symphony of the Planets, as well as Symphony of Space, which is also entirely incorporated into these sounds, like also the atmospheres of planets and suns, and even all material and immaterial things of every kind, concerning which you have spoken of a symphony of the spheres. This symphony, these sounds are, so far, still unknown to the earthly scientists in particular, and to the people in general, other than just the exceptions to the rule, even those people who perceive these humming sounds, that is to say, symphony of the earth, and who are of the opinion that something is not right in their heads, and thus, not that real things are going to and fro. Can you once again officially explain what it actually concerns with these humming sounds, if it should not remain a secret?
It does not have to remain a secret, because in about 10 to 15 years, a portion of the earthly sciences should also encounter these things. Moreover, it concerns the fact that every planet, every comet, every larger asteroid, meteor, and every sun, as well as the nebulae and clouds in space and space itself, as well as every black hole and all material and immaterial things existing, at all produce certain tones and sounds, which we, as you said, actually call symphony. Within the entire realm of the creation or of the universe, nothing exists that would not be incorporated into these symphonies, so therefore, all material and immaterial things generate certain tones and sounds and even symphonies in a swinging wave-based form, which usually cannot be perceived by the human ear because these move in too low or too high frequencies for this. Only through abnormal, degenerative, physiological changes can these sounds or symphonies be perceived by human life forms, whereby these then become effective in an extremely consciousness-impairing, nerve-wracking, and psyche-damaging manner. The frequencies of these symphonies or sounds reach into all levels, so thus, the lowest sounds, like humming sounds, as you say, are given as well as the highest whirring sounds and shimmering sounds, etc. As the frequencies are virtually countless in their number, these are also the sources of the sound symphonies, for these relate to all that exists of the material and immaterial. Thus, if one starts from the earth, then these sound sources are, for example, the waters, in terms of the deep sea movements as well as the movements of the waters of the lakes, rivers, streams, creeks, and springs. Even the roar of the waves, the small and mighty storms, the tectonic movements of the earth's interior, the bubbling of magma in the earth, and the eruptions of the volcanoes belong to these, as well as the rain, hail, and the various layers of the atmosphere, which rub against each other, as well as the winds against the trees, grasses, flowers, houses, mountains, sand dunes and deserts, steppes, icebergs, glaciers, and surfaces of ice, as well as against windmills, wind turbines, ships, aircraft, rockets, missiles, and vehicles of all types, against land surfaces and everything else that materially exists. Also to be noted are the voices and sounds of humans and animals, insects, birds and fish, and any other water creatures. All sounds together form the actual symphony of the planet, as we call it. And as this happens in the purely material realm, so this also happens in any immaterial sphere in the entire universe, each of which also produces its own symphony, like also fog flowing on the Earth or nebulae existing in space and all other formations that are absolutely impossible to cite in their number, because everything is so immeasurable that it could neither be grasped by purely human understanding nor by technological possibilities of any kind.
And what about dental care and dental hygiene of a personal form?
We maintain our teeth by sound waves.
Contact Report 225.
From the inner and outer belts, in which our visible universe is enclosed, as Ptah explained, if I understood him correctly, a so-called background radiation proceeds, which can also be designated as background noise, etc.
Contact Report 228.
We know, after all, that the total universe does not expand forever, but only expands until the time of 155.5 trillion years, and then succumbs to contraction. During the expansion process of the entire universe, the visible material universe also becomes larger and larger, if I look at the whole thing correctly. And since this must be the case, there must also be different temperatures in our universe, because I assume that heat and cold must be generated by the constant change movement. Am I correct in my assumption?
That is of correctness. Although the temperature fluctuations are universe-wide and very minimal, they occur mainly in those parts of our material universe where the uninterrupted change through the outer immaterial belts takes place. This is what we call the transitionless open change zone.
This transformation zone does produce a rushing sound, as Ptah taught me on the Great Journey. I was also allowed to hear it through the technical devices in the giant spacecraft. It was simply gigantic. Ptah explained to me that the Earthlings call this phenomenon cosmic background radiation and assume that the Big Bang took place there in that zone and that the universe also ended there.
Which does not correspond to correctness, as you know.
Of course, because that is where the actual total universe begins with its other 6 immeasurable belts. Ptah also said that the differences in temperature are actually very small and therefore only subject to tiny fluctuations caused by differences in density in all regions of our material universe.
Contact Report 230.
Tell me, what do you think of the bad music that is evidently starting to gain a foothold on Earth?
This is an extremely deplorable matter because now comes the time, as I know from a view of the future, in which many evils will appear. Worldwide, more and more parents are deteriorating, who sexually abuse their children, push them into prostitution, rent them out for this purpose and sell them for child pornography, etc., and whereby they are, however, also subjected to terrible torments, and they are even murdered. Apart from this, More and more children will commit suicide over time, with the suicide rate rising unstoppably. In the future, the harmonic music will be largely substituted by unbelievably disharmonic noise, which is called modern music style. This results in a total disharmony that seizes countless individuals, namely young, adolescents, and adults. Tremendously large disharmonic noise events of this kind will take place in the future, whereby in many cases all decency and self-esteem will be trampled underfoot. Many will become criminals in order to indulge in this dignityless activity, and the addiction to drugs and the criminality associated with it will also increase to an immeasurable extent worldwide, as will the unemployment and prostitution, which will be shamelessly publicly advertised in the press and on television.
Contact Report 236.
In my office, interestingly enough, my CD device was running and was playing a musical piece of Julio Iglesias in a rather loud manner. Naturally, I rushed off immediately in order to investigate. And indeed, my CD device was turned on and was loudly playing the 8th piece of a Julio Iglesias disc.
I must also confess to you that the music pieces heard by Ava and Silvano, which you had not interrupted then, were not the first ones. Before those, I listened to the sounds of the Prisoner's Chorus from the classical piece Nabucco, but the bolero and 2 country melodies left me no peace.
You seem to be quite versatile in the matters of music.
You are not the only one who can enjoy and be refreshed by the most diverse styles of music. Even as you love classical music, rock, country, truck songs, folk songs, pop, marching music, rap, soul, spirituals, gospel, and our music, as well as Oriental, Middle Eastern, and Far Eastern music and rhythms of the natives, I too am just as versatile and have no fixed boundaries in reference to the style and direction of this very pleasing, loosening, and profound muse.
I am surprised there, however, because I'd often thought that I was a little crazy, for I have such diverse music directions. No matter what style and direction it always is, I can take pleasure in any harmonious music. Only with disharmonious things can I do nothing, such as with nonsense pop, which is so discordant that it threatens to tear up not only the psyche, but also the physique painfully. The most foolish thing here is that human beings have already become so confused that they designate better music, which is truly harmonious, like also pop, as the idiocy of disharmony.
This is because the human beings of the earth are already so false perceiving and false feeling that to them, disharmony appears as a purpose in life. The more the person succumbs to confusion and aberration, the more his or her innermost self aligns itself toward disharmony, which is particularly expressed in the sense that they become a stranger to true harmony and perceive disharmony as invigorating. This has now already been the case with the Earth humans for many years, specifically with the young generations, who strive for an alienation from reality, which must necessarily end in misery. Therefore, it has also been the case for many years that only very seldom is such valuable music composed and played. Disharmony has already won such supremacy among the Earth humans that it is regarded as and also perceived as harmony.
Contact Report 239.
This music that you are playing there, it has a lot of resemblance with our music.
It is the chorus of the Hebrew slaves from Nabucco by Giuseppe Verdi.
It is well known to me, like also many other melodies that you are playing.
Contact Report 241.
Every planet and every star has its own resonance, its own sound frequency, which is called planetary harmony or planetary melody, echo or echo. The sound frequency is fundamentally different from planet to planet or from star to star. So practically no celestial body has the same resonance and sound frequency as another. Swinging wave is to be defined as sound, which in turn is built up on a certain frequency, which is determined by the magnetism of the celestial body. If these two factors now work together, as is the case with the celestial bodies, then the resonance, the planetary melody, and planetary harmony is created. When I explain that the swinging wave is to be defined as sound, I mean the natural swinging wave of the planet. So this unique swinging wave results in the sound, which is called resonance, echo, etc., just as the planet's own melody. The frequency of this sound now produces vibrations in the Earth, which reach far into the atmosphere and stratosphere and even far into the world space and produce certain effects. Depending on whether the sound waves vibrate out into the atmosphere through earth or rock, through ice masses or through water masses, different impulses are generated which produce different effects. For example, the northern lights are created together with solar particles or the glacial lights, which are also known to you. The earthquake lights are also based on the same causes, only that they are created because the planetary sound changes when underground and above ground volcanic activities occur actively. When underground gas chambers explode or water infiltration take place in magma masses, or when tectonic earth plate shifts or other events of an earth internal nature occur, of which there are many forms. The actual process of luminous phenomena, for example, has different forms in its genesis, which can vary from molecular changes and molecular cleavages to pure electromagnetic swinging waves and pure gas formation or electricity agglomerations.
You also think in a very extensive form about will-o'-the-wisps and ball flashes, if I understand you correctly?
That is true, but really only in a very long-distance form, because such phenomena belong only very remotely to the Earth's magnetism and Earth resonance phenomena, although it is not to be denied that there is a connection, even if only in a very distant form. Explaining these connections, however, would go far too far, and it would fill books with explanations and formulas, etc.
Contact Report 246.
For some time, there has been talk that radio telephones are dangerous for humans because of the radio waves. Is this really the case? Or is it once again an attempt by certain elements to ruin the lives of radio telephone owners? I also have one in my car, as you know, which is why I want to be sure if it can damage my health.
Radio waves are indeed harmful to human health, as is the case with animals and plants. Strong radio wave transmitters can damage life forms of all kinds over very long distances, including mature trees and elephants as well as whales, if they are hit by the radio waves. In addition to the pollution of the environment of known species, a certain radio wave interference plays a part in the so-called tree death, which is partly to blame, especially where the radio waves occur more frequently or in a concentrated manner, such as at locations or within the range of strong radio wave transmitters, etc. In particular, the antennas of such transmitters or receivers are the most important factors in this respect because they are the source of destructive and damaging forces. Antennas for radio waves can, depending on the strength of the transmission or reception range, spread their damaging or even destructive effect hundreds of meters or even a few kilometers away through the swinging waves that transport the dangerous forces within themselves. When life forms, and especially humans, are hit by these forces, they react just as much as animals and plants of all kinds. Among many other health-damaging manifestations, the consequences of being struck by these forces are tumors, such as cancer, abortions, cardiac arrhythmia, immunodeficiency symptoms, psycho, and circulatory disturbances, damage to vision and hearing, as well as brain damage. This applies wherever strong forces are transmitted to life forms by the electromagnetic swinging waves, including in the case of radio telephones, where the transmission of forces via the antenna is not very far-reaching, so in the case of smaller devices it is sufficient to keep the antenna approx. 16 centimeters away from the head in order not to be hit directly by the damaging forces. If antennas of radio telephones or radios as well as TV sets, etc. are brought into the direct area of the head and brain organs warm up because the antenna forces, penetrating from outside, produce a heat generation which is not beneficial to the head and brain organs, but very harmful.
Contact Report 248.
When I observe the humans and hear the music that they listen to, I constantly determine that the humans so much resemble the music that they take in.
This has been a well-known fact to us for tens of thousands of years. People always arrange music according to their evolutionary insight and cognition, as well as according to the corresponding feelings and thoughts, ethics and consciousness, and thus according to the imprint of the personality. In addition, it is to be frighteningly noted with the human beings of the earth that they make so-called music that truly has nothing at all to do with music, and that influences the psyche and the consciousness so destructively that the worst disharmony arises. But this so-called music is the reflected likeness of those who produce or listen to it, whose psyche is agitated and destroyed and whose evolution is frighteningly stagnated, in that these people are hostile to life and incapable of sustaining their own lives, and they stroll along the path of massive destruction. This music, which is nothing more than a screaming disharmony, emits the worst destruction, contempt for humankind, contempt for the creation, the will for destruction, and the disregard for human rights and the rights of life. This, in contrast to truly harmonious music, which develops the psyche and evolution, which is affirmed in a life of respect for human beings and respect for other life forms, in compliance with the life-promoting laws and recommendations.
Contact Report 251.
And once again a world war will threaten the earth and the entire human race by their unreasonableness. The Fourth World War. Some sensible people, however, are able to neutralize the threat, which is not least once again promoted by the invention of new, powerful weapons, which will be a realization of the weapons from science fiction novels, namely in the field of deadly light emitters, ray cannons, ray rifles and ray pistols, etc., in the field of the invention of new, powerful weapons. All this is linked to 3 scientists who will create an incredibly cheap source of energy. However, this will not be the only new source of energy, because another one will also be found based on sound vibrations. But this will also lead to the development of new deadly weapons.
Contact Report 252. Contact Report 540.
Another question. Animals, as more rarely humans, are often misled by magnetic disturbances, both on land and in water and in the air. We have talked about this before. But afterwards you said that the animals would also be affected by another very dangerous factor. Unfortunately, you explained this outside of the contact conversation, which is why none of it was written down. If I understood correctly, then you explained that the animals would also be affected by the so-called noise pollution, to the point of fatal form if they were harassed by low or high tones inaudible to humans, which affect their own low or high tones, which they need for navigation. All other human-made sounds and noises of any kind are also capable of disturbing the animals in their navigation, because these sounds and noises, etc., superimpose those low or high sounds which are emitted for navigation or communication purposes. If, however, these navigation sounds are superimposed by noise, as is the case with human noise, for example ship engines and propellers, aircraft engines and jet engines, or other engines of all kinds, explosions and engine noise of all kinds, and other various sources of noise that produce certain disturbing sound waves, then the animal navigation system is disturbed to such an extent that, for example, marine animals are stranded, or land animals plunge over cliffs, etc. in droves. Such murderous sources of noise also include bomb tests of all kinds, as well as bomb droppings and gunfire, etc. for certain animal species. However, in addition to noise pollution, radio waves are also harmful or even fatal, just as radio waves are also harmful for humans, as are strong electromagnetic waves emanating from high-voltage power lines and transformer stations, etc. However, the so-called normal electrosmog should also be mentioned in this context.
Contact Report 253.
What are you doing in our offices? Do you also listen to music like Ta or Quetzal?
That is so, yes. You have a lot of nice music, and Ptah explained to us how we have to operate the devices.
Contact Report 267.
I know that I have been told from time to time that after I leave the office, sometimes there is still someone in there playing music, or that someone is discussing something a bit louder than is the case with me.
This corresponds to the facts.
Contact Report 282.
When about half of the pregnancy has passed, the mother feels her baby's first romping in her stomach, which has now reached a height of almost 30 centimeters. This is also the time when the baby reacts to noises with movements and kicks that are well perceived by the mother. The fact is that, for example, loud, disharmonic pop, rock and new jazz music, etc., that is to say, more spectacle than something harmonious, causes the child in the womb to move and kick much more strongly than quiet classical or other harmonious sounds. It seems as if the unborn child wants to defend itself against the disharmony it is hit by.
Contact Report 299.
However, water is also extremely sensitive to electromagnetic oscillations, which are extremely diverse. Radio and television radiation, for example, change the water just as negatively as bad pop, jazz, folk, pop and classical music, etc., and disharmonic noises, etc., so also disharmonies, which are classified as good and harmonic by Earth humans due to their defective sense of harmony. The voice of humans and animals can also negatively influence and change water, but spoken words can also be taken for granted. Of course, the water also reacts in the opposite form when there are harmonious swinging waves that positively influence it.
Contact Report 301.
Already at the beginning of our contacts in 1975, you explained to me that everything in the whole universe emits swinging waves and tones. So also the smallest parts, thus also quarks, positrons, neutrons, electrons, and thus also the whole level of the atoms. These tonal swinging waves, I remember your explanations, form the so-called harmonic cosmic music.
That is correct. The whole universe and everything that exists in it, in every form in the coarse and fine material realms, is classified into swinging waves and tones, which appear in certain sound sequences and produce what you call cosmic music.
So this also applies to the spiritual energies, right?
Certainly.
Contact Report 312.
You used to sing a lot back in the day. You have a very good voice for that. However, it is a very long time since I last heard you in this way. Don't you care about the singing anymore? For my part, I still have recordings of this form with instrumental accompaniment, which you have added to your respective songs on records.
Well, times change, so do habits and pleasures and so forth. Singing has simply passed me by with all the vicious attacks and precipitations that have been coming at me from my better half for decades. There are probably still some group members who have heard me singing, also from the tape recorder, but that time is really over. I am completely out of practice. The tapes have also disappeared or been destroyed, so nothing remains from that time. It is probably just as well, because life does not stand still and changes, just like man.
Certainly, that is correct. I could give you...
No, please do not. Those days are over, and they will not come back, even if you play me the pieces.
That is right.
Contact report 386.
The electromagnetic vibrations from electronic devices as well as strong earth magnetic vibrations are indeed really not harmless, because hallucinations, aggression, depression, low morale and discord, indeed also the phenomena of ghostly apparitions, can even be provoked which have no connection with acute or stored mental vibrations. Respectively, fluidal powers, rather, are based, as a rule, on fantasies and imaginations, which are normally simply caused by states of angst. The basis for this can really be very strong electromagnetism, for example, by way of electronic devices and so forth, or it can simply arise as a result of a strong magnetic field of the Earth. Extremely low-pitched sounds from electronic devices and other things as well as from nature, which cannot be perceived by the human ear, so-called infrasound, can cause strong vibrations in the case of objects and with the human body and all its organs, such as, for instance, also in the eyes. The consequences of that are hallucinations and panic attacks as well as depression, discord and negative moral states, because the thoughts and feelings as well as the consciousness succumb to confusion as a result of the vibrations. In the said form, there is a connection among infrasound, electromagnetism, and ghostly apparitions. Infrasound and electromagnetism can trigger the internal attack and escape mechanism of the human being, as well as panic attacks and hallucinations, and so forth. And it is especially the case if one is in a spooky or weird-looking place, in a depressed mood or in a mystical situation, and so forth. That which is decisive in this regard is that the sense of the human beings is under great tension, whereby he perceives the environment and his situation, and so forth, as a threat. In this state, then ghostly apparitions can be seen or strange, ghostly sounds can be heard, or unreal touches can be felt, and so forth. Strong electromagnetic fields have effects on the human body and its organs, which therefore also includes the brain and consciousness, as well as the thoughts, emotions, and the psyche, which lead to hallucinations, whereby the human being sees, hears, and feels things which are not real. Electromagnetism and infrasound produce an effect on the human brain in such a way that, for example, the feeling is created that someone strange is present, a ghost, and so forth, because he cannot be seen, or can be dimly seen as a result of the imagination. Faces and figures can also be seen, and sounds as well as unreal breathing, and so forth can be heard, or, in the same way, unreal touches can be felt. Thereby the human being can become increasingly insecure and anxious, because the activity of fantasy and the imagination increases and everything is considered absolutely real. As for example, in a similar manner to the way human beings appear who believe that they have been abducted and examined or impregnated by extraterrestrials and later have their fetuses stolen, which, in regard to pregnancy, naturally only applies to women. With all of these human beings, fantasy and the imagination, so to speak, go mad, whereby everything is of such a strong nature that the fantasy images and the imagination appear absolutely real, all caused by infrasound, or by strong electromagnetic fields. And human beings who succumb to this consider everything to be real and believe that it is truthful reality in such a way that consequently even polygraphs and interviews under hypnosis can be withstood.
Contact report 426.
I did not have a long time because I listened to the music playing on the radio. It was uplifting for me.
Contact report 427.
It should be noted, however, that the frequencies do not have their own form of memory, such as water, all liquids, and living materials and life forms of all kinds. The water memory form is only designed to store dynamic and thus electromagnetic impulses, which are aimed at preserving the nature and purity of water. As a liquid, water is of course also conductive for electricity, and therefore electromagnetic oscillations and sound waves, etc. So, for example, the high-frequency oscillations and sound waves of the water creatures, such as the whales, can be transmitted over hundreds and even thousands of kilometers, whereby these oscillations and sound waves ebb and flow again and dissolve, just like material substances, when they dilute in such a way that no molecule is present anymore. If this were not so, then so many vibrations would accumulate in the waters, in rivers, lakes, and seas in their memory that a hopeless chaos would arise, and the water life forms would no longer communicate with each other and among themselves, and could no longer find each other, and consequently they would die out, or would have died out before they could actually come to life.
Contact Report 478 FIGU Special Bulletin 49.
I am pleased with your explanation, even though the whole thing is a sad case and also arouses sadness about his Michael Jackson's death. A lot of human beings will honestly mourn for him, I can imagine, because his music and his singing were good, even if it was pop. This in contrast to other forms of pop, which have been around for years, and are truly nothing more than a tremendously disharmonic shrieking, howling, and whining, in contrast to which the howling of wolves sounds directly harmonious.
You said that very well, because what is nowadays usually called music and singing by the young Earth humans, and to which the adolescents are frenetically attached, no longer contains any harmony at all. As you say, it is nothing more than screaming, howling, and whining, which no longer contains any harmony whatsoever, but only aggression, to which the adolescents become addicted and dangerously antisocial. As a result, certain young people become angry destroyers of human achievements and degenerates who are unscrupulous and full of hatred and out of sheer lust and wantonness, etc. They endanger the life and limb of their fellow human beings or even seriously injure them, beat them to a pulp, or kill them. In fact, a very large part of this lies in the forms of what is called singing and music, whereby the dissonant pop and the like fundamentally promote aggression, antisociality, irresponsibility, virtuelessness, and hatred, etc. in adolescence. Through these forms of howling, shrieking and whining, as you say, which today are called singing and music, Earth humans, especially children and youth, are increasingly losing respect for the norms of society, the virtues, and the righteous. Mainly many adolescents who have not had an adequate education and are therefore prone to antisocial behavior are transformed into evil and bad people, which leads to contempt for human beings, law, and order. Factors from which racism, extremism, radicalism, and terrorism also arise. On the other hand, however, the alleged music and the unmelodic screeching mentioned above also gives rise to the opposite, namely that the young people are misled by the rapture of religion and other sectarians to believe in religion and God, and consequently they become believers in God, as you aptly call it in your new book. Very little truly harmonious singing and harmonious music will be created, and if they are, then only by older human beings and interpreters who are still fond of the truly harmonious sounds and who also have a corresponding way of life.
Contact Report 512.
Zafanat Paneak explained again that on the earth a religious sectarian organization works together with a certain secret service to manipulate the humans via the television, computers, and the internet as they wish. Also disharmonious as well as religious sectarian. Music is steered in this manner and through vibration impulses leads to mass hysteria, etc. Today, there is hardly anything that is not used to influence people subconsciously and to drive matters, actions and behaviors that are not self-determined, but criminally determined by the thoughts and aspirations of those who gain some profit from it. Very many people are to such a degree no longer capable of their own decision-making, which they do not notice, however, that therefore they do things and maintain thoughts that are given to them subconsciously by vibration impulses.
And probably hardly anyone can defend himself against it, because everyone assumes that he acts according to his own will.
This is right, because everything happens within the subconsciousness.
It should nevertheless be possible, however, that the human being can defend against it, I assume, or...
That is correct. But a clear consciousness is required which does not allow itself to be affected by vibration impulses of any kind. This includes open advertising and advertisements of all kinds that are designed to entice people into doing certain things, actions, deeds, and purchases, etc.
Consequently, it is also no wonder that disastrous riots are ever more prevalent, since for about 2.5 decades, a purported music has reached people worldwide that is entirely disharmonious, by which these people become more active in Gewalt, unscrupulous, conscienceless, and indifferent to each other. And if everything continues in the framework mentioned, then an uncontrollable anarchy and roaring chaos will ultimately develop.
Contact Report 516.
But I like the music that comes out of your computer.
It also suits me.
Yes, I also like this piece of music, which is why I listen to it sometimes, like just today when I was waiting for you. It is a piece by the interpreter Edith Prock and is called Do You Hear the Bells of Stella Maria?
Contact Report 569.
Already your father Svath taught me in my childhood that all animals and all creatures, from the largest to the smallest, have their own means of communication, ranging from simple sounds, movements, vibrations, and their own physical behavior, etc., to certain effective phonetic understandings. You cannot say spoken language because there is no phonetic language. Svath said that this way of expression corresponds to a misunderstanding and chaotic judgment, because phonetic is only the orthography, not a language, because it is only done with words that are formed and expressed by the articulation organs, larynx, mouth and tongue, etc., as certain articulation sounds. In this way of letter or syllable articulation, language is known only to the human being, whereas Svath simply spoke of the sounds that are peculiar to the animals, such as the dogs barking, the roosters crowing, the goats grumbling, the birds whistling and chirping, the howler monkeys roar, the crickets chirping, etc., etc. In addition, he taught me that all animals and creatures, depending on their genus or species, have a whole repertoire of different sounds, each representing a particular image, symbol, or even a particular syllable, so that mutual understanding is possible. Moreover, these sounds vary from region to region, so that one can speak of different sound dialects. But this is only possible because animals and creatures, depending on their genus or species, have a world of thought and instinctive intelligence appropriate to them, and even some higher mammals have an instinctive, semi-conscious world of thought and a corresponding intelligence.
Contact Report 583.
Can you tell me in short and simple words how stress and physical inactivity, as well as various types of music, affects the life itself, the quality of life, and the life period of the human being?
And now, concerning the different types of music, it must be said that good and positive music elevates the feelings of life and the health as well as the whole physical and mental state, and accordingly, promotes a good and righteous life attitude and corresponding positive behavior. However, such kinds of music can be found only in harmonious sounds and tones, which on the earth are given only in classical music, as well as in harmonious swinging pop music. What otherwise relates, however, with regard to all discordant sounds and tones, which correspond to nothing other than outrageous and droning noise discharges, as well as the voices concerning only a roaring, jangling, cawing, screaming, howling, and yowling, and so forth, corresponds to a disharmony beyond compare. Naturally, this also yields its malicious and negative effects, which therein reside in the fact that genuine interpersonal relationships no longer come about. Clear order no longer prevails, and the human beings who adhere to this kind of noise-making become indifferent towards their fellow human beings and all life in general. Their senses dull, therefore they also no longer perceive the reality, and also can no longer realize thoughts of belonging together. In addition to that and the many other arising damages, the human being drifts off, mostly teenagers and grown-up ungrown-ups, and falls victim to the asocialness. Thus the life and limb of the fellow human being will also no longer be respected. Consequently, they are brutally confronted and they are beaten with blows and kicks, and indeed not seldom up to the permanent disability or to the death. There is no more sense seen in the life. Instead, it is senselessly lived only for the day and in pursuit of pleasure, and the thoughts and feelings become cold, mentally incompetent and ill, because the whole thing likewise corresponds to a health-damaging stress, out of which also emerges all the same factors that I initially mentioned with regard to a stressful mode of life. The effects in many cases are also the same and even up to the suicide.
Behind the whole thing, I still see very much more. The tremendous noise of the present day is arranged with dreadful disharmonic crashing and bellowing, which is crazily referred to as music, has insanely stupid forms, driving right through one's marrow and bones, and unhinges compulsive depression and unsatisfaction, etc. However, not only young but even people of the older generations are not able to understand this. Those who are quite thrilled about the abominable as well as nerve-wracking instrumental and vocal discordance and no longer have any clue about what sounds really harmonious. The whole thing had begun in the mid-1980s, as even the false emphasizing of words and sentences sprang up and has spread across the world like wildfire. Up to this time, with regard to music, there was only very little that was disharmonious and could not be referred to as music and singing. But then, precisely in the mid-1980s, had that terribleness then suddenly struck. With the instrumental noise, racket and roaring of alleged music, as well as with the bellowing, howling, and yowling of the equally alleged singing. For example, with the false emphasizing of the phrases and words. Similarly, a worldwide phase of the disharmony appeared, which will probably only die down again, when the way is found back to the right intonation and to really harmonious sounds and tones, and therefore also to the really harmony-filled music and to singing of the same kind. But that, I think, will take a long time still, because when I think of what Emmanuel had said, that in the current time and even still into the future, the people will stand up against their authorities, as is also only just happening in the Ukraine and in Crimea and continues to happen, then there is still much evil to be expected.
Contact Report 611.
Last night, together with Ava, I watched a music program on TV, Melodies for Millions, in which good old music was brought from the last century up to 1985, which was really harmonious and psychically touching, and gave me an exceptionally good well-feeling. In addition, I received a letter from an esteemed and dear friend, who subsequently asked how I myself am towards music, and how you play are and perform this. If it is possible for you to say something about this, then I would personally also be very interested in what explanations you can give in relation to the music.
The music corresponds to a very wide-ranging might, and indeed, both in the positive as well as in the negative. It characterizes the human being already from birth and touches him or her in the depths of his or her self-created inner nature, which he or she also shows to the outside world, and this has nothing to do with the innermost creational natural nature. The might of music acts therewith on the human being in accordance with the wise, as his or her inner nature is formed in the evil or good, that is to say, negatively or positively, such as rebellious, malicious, disharmonious, spiteful, mean, sneaky, infamous, chicken-hearted, envious, psychopathic, deadly, immodest, unfree, unfair, unhappy, unsatisfied, embittered, pernicious or angry, etc., or equalized, merciful, modest, free, friendly, peaceful, patient, pleasant, kind, good-natured, harmonious, helpful, calm, restrained, reliable, warm-hearted and courteous, etc. Thus, the music has, depending on its positive, that is to say, harmonious, or negative, that is to say, disharmonious form in itself, that it effectuates that which is good and positive or negative and bad in the human being. Therefore, in the negative case, the might of the music can drive the human being into a psychical misery, into a moral decline, and into a general malignant downfall, just as, however, lead him or her in a positive wise to the psychical elation and to high performance, etc. Good music creates high cultures, and through bad music, high cultures are destroyed again. And thus, since time immemorial, it happened and is happening also on the earth. In a good, positive phase with regard to the music, times always prevailed in each case, which were peaceful, good, and progressive. If, however, phases of negative, bad music arose, then the times were bad. With bad music, irresponsible rulers and other elements often seized the political and military might and instigated fights, wars, and upheavals, like, for example, the world wars on the earth in the last century, therefore which were from 1914-1918 and 1939-1945, as well as the Vietnam and Korean Wars, and in the last 25 years war actions which broke out in Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as the current criminal machinations of the Islamic State, as you correctly call this murderer and criminal organization. Since time immemorial, harmonious forms of music prevailed before and after such events, through which earth humans and peoples were attuned peacefully. Observed and considered with respect to the earth, the good and positive music which sprang up after the last wars changed again in recent times. That is to say, in the 1980s, into the negative and bad, and even into the evil, as you yourself have said many times since then. So prevailing on the earth since the 1980s, the might of a very negative music from which the humankind, the politics and economy, the armies and religions are maliciously negatively influenced and controlled, through which very much mischief, hardship and misery as well as destruction is wrought. As this is also proven by the many hotbeds of war, uprisings, and criminal machinations in many corners of the world. Not only with us Pliaran, but also with the human beings of Earth, the might of the music has been known since ancient times, this with terrestrial peoples, particularly in the ancient high cultures, who knew that the might of good, positive music helped civilizations to improve, while negative, bad music, in turn, sealed their downfall. Primarily, great philosophers knew about the might of the music and its influence on the societal decision, this both in relation to the upswing as well as the decline of civilizations. However, they also knew of the might of harmonious, good and positive music, through which promoted the intelligence and the psyche could be refined, or that through disharmonious, negative, bad music much terribleness had been wrought, to which entire advanced civilizations fell victim. They had, however, also known that under certain circumstances, music gives rise to similar frequencies as hypnosis in the brain of the human being, and indeed, both in the good and positive, as well as in the evil and negative. The human beings of the ancient high cultures were clearly aware that through good, harmonious, and positive music, the human ability to learn increased enormously, and also the character as well as the good and positive modes of behavior become refined. Music is for the human being one of the most important factors of life with regard to the formation of his or her thoughts, feelings, and the psyche, because it imparts to him or her a value consciousness, but unfortunately, not only in that which is good and positive, but also in the evil, negative, and bad. If the value and the might of the harmonious music is highly estimated, then the human being also feels uplifted and feels impulsations of the equalizedness, the love, the peace, and freedom in themselves, whereby in the same wise also his or her morals and behavior are equally influenced. However, if the music is disharmonious, of inferior value to completely valueless, then the human becomes weighed down by aggressiveness and unequalizedness and finds no access to real love, to true peace and open freedom, as well as not to a valueful moral state and to corresponding modes of behavior. And on the earth today, exactly these evil, negative, and bad forms prevail among countless human beings of earth of all ages, because they are caught by the might of this malicious and disharmonious music, which since the 1980s prevailed as fashionable, and in its spell transfixes all those human beings of earth, who in themselves are even malicious, aggressive, unequalized, unhappy, unorderly, abusive, negative, unsatisfied, often conscienceless, rebellious, and irrational ones. The human being of earth should themselves therefore follow the example of a child, because as long as they are not influenced in a bad wise by evil, disharmonious, negative, and bad music, they are open for good, harmonious, and positive music. Thus, if the child is observed and considered, then it is to be said regarding this, that they, at least as long as they come in contact with normal, good, harmonious, and positive music, are better able to perceive distinct, nuanced tones in the communication, and indeed fully independent of whether they can enjoy any good musical instruction or not. This indicates that through the music, they can learn to pursue their own thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and are able to sense the voice tones of other human beings as to whether something is right or not with them. However, the world of music and its tones enables not only the child, but also the adult human being to better understand his or her surroundings and to communicate themselves to the fellow human beings. Among us Pleiaren, for millennia, it has no longer been a secret how much the music promotes, in many areas of the development of the human being, also cognitive, mental, emotional, and social capabilities. The musical intelligence corresponds to one of the most important parts of the intelligence of the human being. Music allows the connections between the nerve cells of both hemispheres of the brain to grow in a better wise, whereby also the concentration and communication is promoted. Therefore, it will also be well understood that it is particularly important that the human being should be musically active themselves, such as by he or she singing or playing a musical instrument. At the very least, it is necessary that while listening to music and singing, it is jointly lived in a thought-feeling, psyche-based wise, because a purely passive listening to music brings only little or nothing at all, which could increase any values in the human being. Already in childhood and even already in infancy, the human being should be continuously confronted with good, harmonious, and more positive, valueful music, because this improves the performance of the intelligence and especially the capabilities of the spatial imagination. Sprinkled with harmoniously good and positive music, not only the child, but also the adult human being is more receptive, socially competent, self-confident, equalized, peaceful, free, and behavior-wise more humane than a human who is unmusical or kills his or her time with disharmonious music. Although no better humans can be created with good, more harmonious and positive music. Nevertheless, already created talents and good characteristics certainly deepen, because fundamentally the education has an effect in all the things of the behavior with which the human being is formed on the one hand, and he or she forms themselves on the other hand. Music, however, can make the human being especially happy. This is an undisputable fact, because gladly heard, harmoniously good and positive music stimulates specific regions of the brain, which are responsible for ensuring that positive and peaceful as well as free thoughts are nourished, from which pleasant feelings originate. Good. Harmonious music is always an incentive, creating calming and good memories that are always connected with revitalizing thoughts and feelings, by which often many problems can be solved, also with regard to interpersonal relationships. On the other hand, exactly the opposite emerges with disharmonious, negative, ungood, and bad music. In the brain, distinct areas are addressed, and indeed both with disharmonious as well as with harmonious music, although the forms of behavior in human beings are accordingly different. With harmonious music arises decisiveness, excitation, joy, being inspired and upbuilding feelings of elation as well as interest. Whereas, in fact, in the negative case with disharmonious, bad music, even oppressive, negative, unequalized thoughts and feelings, as well as corresponding actions and behaviors arise. Really harmonious music is a pleasure and, in addition, work for the thoughts, out of which proceed corresponding feelings. In the brain, the entire musical tones are once again newly put together, through which the brain is formed. And when it is frequently exposed to these challenges, then it changes itself, and namely in accordance with the wise, just as the tones of the music are formed simply negatively or positively. The brain adjusts itself to the tones of the music, negatively or positively, simply in accordance with the disharmoniousness or harmoniousness. The music effectuates in the cerebral cortex, that the nerve cells there enlarge themselves and link themselves up better. In human beings, the musical ear is trained from a young age as a consequence of what is given to him or her to hear. Therefore, this also means that music, for example, sounds wonderful for one human being or cultural circle, whereas compared to another, it can come across rather repulsively or strange, which effectively has to do with the personal understanding of music. But that has nothing to do with disharmonious, negative, ungood and bad music, as this has prevailed far and wide on the earth since the 1980s, and which equals more of a yowling, screeching, whining, and a misuse of the sounds and tones than real music and real singing. Such can sound only malicious, disharmonious, and bad for a musical ear, while for abysmally disharmonious human beings, it promotes their aggression, aggressiveness, naivety, unequalizedness, unhappiness, and unsatisfaction, as well as unreliability and so forth. However, music still has other effects, because it creates a great influence with respect to the management of time in the brain, the thoughts and feelings as well as the psyche and the self-perception. Music has an affect on all levels of the brain, and it has direct access to the thoughts, feelings, the emotions, and to the psyche, and since time immemorial, it is anchored deeply in the history of the human being. Music makes use of ancient mechanisms of the human psyche and the human motivations, and human beings can even profit from it. If they hear sad music, especially then if they have grief or are in sorrow, as well as if nostalgia is presented, which often consists of a mixture of joy and sorrow. Music is an expression of creational natural laws that can also be explained as cosmic laws of nature, even though it is also a specific expression of the human thoughts, feelings, and inventions. From this, it also can be recognized that among the countless noises occurring in nature, many sounds and tones appear, which sound harmonious and fundamentally already embody a structure of music.
Thanks. Your explanations tell very much. Today, the human beings of Earth often carry the music around by schlepping around headphones in the ear and the MP3 players in the jacket pockets. The danger is particularly on the streets and traffic, because they no longer hear any outside sounds. Consequently, there are many fatal accidents because of that. In the past, the humans carried around portable radios and let these play at full volume, which created a lot of trouble. And as you have said, it's the howling and yowling as well as the instrumental noise and racket, which on the whole has become referred to as music since the 1980s and which makes the human being psychopathic and crazy. Besides being equipped to wreak much calamity, and indeed in addition to the fact that those human beings whose music sense is directed towards good, harmonious, and positive music are semi-driven into madness. From this I gather that according to your words, as a result of this catastrophic musical style prevailing since the 1980s, precisely that which is falsely called music, a very unpleasant future is to be expected. This also, therefore, simply because the human beings who indulge in this wailing and racket, which they call music, have no true sense of life, as well as no thoughts and feelings of a healthy self-worth, let alone because any sense to follow the creational natural laws and recommendations, through which to them the true love, freedom, harmony, and peace would be their own, and these high values would come to life and would be represented. As I see the matter, the whole thing is running once again towards another catastrophe and beyond.
That regarding music is in line with the meaning of what I said, and what you further allude to is absolutely within the realm of possibility, and would again be, among other things, a downfall consequence through the power of the malignant, negative, bad, and unpleasant music that has once again dominated the world since the 1980s.
Since this roaring, howling, yelping, and howling as well as the instrumental noise and racket have arisen since the 1980s, which is called music, but which only corresponds to a wretchedness, the human beings of the earth have generally changed in all things very detrimentally, and even to the point of malignancy. If, on the other hand, I look at the general behavior, etc. of the human beings before the 1980s, before the catastrophe radio howl music arose, then everything was still much more peaceful, free, and even loving and harmonious in certain relationships, and that in spite of the idiotic politics and the threats of the Cold War. Since the 1980s, everything worldwide has become very threatening, bad and degenerated into evil, as is also evident in the rising hatred of foreigners, races, and religions, as well as in all the trouble spots and uprisings around the world.
Contact Report 620.
Universe-wide, a creative natural movement vibrates, which spreads artistic impulses in many forms. For example, predominantly in relation to geometric and symmetrical forms, which are important in the production of crop circles, because the earth humans who produce these pictograms absorb these vibrations and transform them into works of art according to their meaning, as in pictograms which they then press into crop fields by treading down the stalks of grain. Apart from geometrical and symmetrical forms, the extraterrestrial or cosmic energetic impulses of art also impart many other forms of art, such as painting, carving, sculpture, drawing and music, etc. I've explained various things to you in earlier private conversations, such as that these creative natural artistic impulses are of a universal energetic vibrational nature and are also contained in the cosmic electromagnetic life, energy, and stimulate the consciousness of human beings through their subconsciousness in order to become artistically active and to represent and create all kinds of art forms, be it drawing, sculpting, or in any other artistic way. Human beings in particular, as well as other life forms, who are sensitive enough to pick up these vibrations contained in the cosmic electromagnetic life energy, can also translate them into many different forms. This is especially true of human beings who have artistic abilities and interests, so that they are especially predisposed or talented to absorb these vibrations. This creative natural art mediating vibration also affects all other living beings, such as animals, birds, insects, reptiles, aquatic creatures, and amphibians, for which the universal art vibrations are important for nest building or for mate making and the play instinct, etc. The same also happens with regard to minerals, which are solids and have a defined chemical composition and also a defined physical crystalline structure. Many of them form themselves into geometrical and symmetrical figures, which consistently arise as universal art from the corresponding creative natural artistic vibrations. So this art arises not only in Earth humans, but also throughout the universe in all of nature, in which geometric and symmetrical forms of all kinds are formed through the extraterrestrial or creative natural art vibrations, such as, for example, galaxies, circles, crosses, rings, cubes, and many other geometrical and symmetrical forms, whereby for Earth humans, the best known in this respect are the crystal forms which arise in minerals of all kinds, but also in snowflakes in infinite variations and in ice formations, etc. The Earth humans who made or continue to make such crop circle pictograms thus find their ideas for them in the extraterrestrial or creative natural universal artistic vibrations through which all life forms and all minerals and plants derive benefit. Plants of all kinds use this extraterrestrial art vibration to form their shapes, just as Earth humans use it to be artistically active, in whatever way, while other life forms use this creative natural art vibration in various other ways according to their species and kind. And because this art vibration does not emanate from Earth, but moves creatively naturally universe-wide, we call it extraterrestrial and universal.
This is once clearly explained. Consequently, no more misunderstandings can occur. Your explanation also says that the art forms are very diverse, which are spread universally by the universal energetic vibrations. Thus, with regard to geometrical and symmetrical forms, I'm thinking of trapezoids, parallelograms, squares, cubes, cuboids, pyramids, cones, spheres, cylinders, triangles, quadrilaterals, pentagons, hexagons, rectangles, polygons, right-angled, isosceles, and equilateral shapes, as well as prisms, rhombuses, tetrahedrons, icosahedrons, dodecahedrons, octahedrons, cuboctahedrons, ellipsoids, paraboloids, pentagrams, and etc., as they come to my mind at the moment.
Everything you name is correct, of course.
The art-mediating cosmic energetic, that is to say, universal energetic vibrations, also appear in other ways, such as with regard to sounds and tones, which are also received and converted by human beings, namely in the form of music. Then we can speak 2 or 3 words today that refer to the sounds, tones, and music in nature, precisely that it is the case that all other living beings are also affected by it, and even all gross and subtle matter, as well as all subtle matter in all universal expanse. All plants and all life forms in general, as well as all atoms and all even tinier substances, as well as all planets, suns, comets, meteors, nebulae and asteroids, etc., move through these sound and tone vibrations, whereby they each produce a kind of music in their own way, which I would like to call a total universal musical hissing and humming, whereby a certain healing power is also emanated in many respects. So every life form, no matter what species or kind, is also struck by these universal energetic musical vibrations, together with the cosmic electromagnetic life energy, and emits harmonious or disharmonious sounds and tones according to its own individuality, which I will therefore call a kind of music. Even your father Svath explained all this to me in this way.
Contact Report 634.
There are many types of music, such as aggressive, frightening, provocative, bouillant, malicious, exciting, humiliating, gloomy, delightful, dangerous, violent, horrifying, harmonious, humorous, jubilant, combative, warlike, boring, lovely, loving, murderous, coercing, unconscious, paranoid, psychopathic, riotous, revolting, creeping, longing, sensual, falling in love, destroying, destructive and compelling forms, among various other species. The power of music in all the variations mentioned has an effect on human emotions and makes them vibrate. And this is because every kind of music has an effect on the body, the thoughts and feelings, and thus also on the psyche, as well as on the consciousness and the whole mental block, and on the subconscious, and on the behavior and action. The situation-related, personality-specific, and music-immanent influencing factors Billy. Immanent in relation to music, inherent in the music or contained in the music, must be taken into account. Music does not only shape the human being from birth, but already in the prenatal or prenatal state, because it touches already in the mother's womb the becoming human being in the deep inside of his developing inner being. When a person is born, music can inspire him, even as a young child, as well as in adolescence and adulthood, to composing, as well as to physical, action, and thought, emotional, psychological, as well as mental and thus intellectual and rational peak performances, and can also have a healing and thus restorative effect with regard to the same factors. So music certainly has a stimulating as well as an energy-creating and therapeutic power. The power and sounds of music can thus be used by doctors, therapists, and educators, for example, to relieve pain, but also to evoke memories or to overcome psychological barriers. Music can be used therapeutically, neuroscientifically, psychologically, psychiatrically, and evolutively, as well as to facilitate interpersonal communication. Music also promotes in man the function of behavioral development. Consequently, certain sounds, melodies, and harmonies touch him peacefully and in a very special way, while others leave him completely untouched, while others again excite him, and even degenerate him maliciously to murderously and destructively, according to the forms as they were called in the introduction. Music of any kind, no matter whether it is good and pleasing, or whether it can be described as alien to music and harmony and must be called evil, bad, miserable or dangerous, murderous and destructive, as has been the case, for example, since the mid-1980s with bad pop and other unmusical, malicious-sounding noises with blare and roar, etc., affects all levels of the brain. As a result, everything related to really good music and harmony, which includes everything from classical to pop and folk music, as well as everything unmusical and disharmonic of any kind, has a direct access to thoughts, feelings, and emotions. This means that every human being is shaped in his character, personality, thoughts, feelings, and psyche in such a way that he acts and lives out his behavior as his senses are shaped in a musical harmonic or unmusical disharmonic direction. The whole thing has been deeply anchored in the human brain since time immemorial, whereby it has evolved along with the general evolution and helps the human being to reconcile himself with ancient mental, emotional, psychological, as well as emotional needs in a world primarily characterized by language, mind, and reason. really harmonic sounds, called music, have nothing to do with unmusical, malicious, disharmonic, discordant noises, booming blasts, and wild roaring, etc., which is called music and misunderstood by earthmen who are disturbed by sound vibrations. Harmonic sounds or music are the expression of universal musical harmonic laws of nature, whereby the whole universe and everything that exists in it makes music in its own way, be it a star, a planet, the sound of the universe, a way of life, the water, the air, or whatever. Musical sounds are universally contained in everything and absolutely common in everything, as is the case with humans, but the forms of harmony or disharmony determine the important role of their behavior, both positive and negative. Many of the universal sounds are not audible to the human ear because the sound vibrations cannot be perceived, even with equipment. Also, crystals of all kinds, precious stones, metals of all kinds, rocks and everyone has sound vibrations, so everything that exists in the universe, therefore there is nothing that does not connect sound vibrationally with everything and everyone in a universal way. The sound vibrations of all existences form the universal connection of all things, that is to say, of everything and everyone that exists in the universe, whereby it is also given that all universally existences have knowledge of each other. In this way, the tiniest in the universe has knowledge of the most powerful, like the most powerful has knowledge of the tiniest, starting from the most powerful hypergalaxy to the tiniest spirit-energetic particle, which earthly physicists will not be aware of for a long time yet, and which will still provide them with much research work. But how it is that people in all cultures and other life forms on all inhabited worlds in the universe have been creating complicated patterns of sound waves and sound vibrations since the beginning of their existence and history, which produce energies and forces as music, melodies, and rhythms in all life forms, corresponds to a specific law of the universe. Basically, the universe itself is harmonically sound determined, which can also be called music determined. Therefore, music is not a pure human invention because, truthfully, man has taken the musical from the universe and worked out and expanded it according to his needs and wishes, etc. Of all the many natural sounds that already constitute a basic structure of music, man perceives only a few sounds and tones that are produced when things like membranes or strings start to vibrate. But these produce only a few frequencies that are audible to man, which are in a simple and clearly structured relationship to each other. In these few frequencies, however, there is the entire vibrational energy from which clear and widely audible signals emerge, although the human usually consciously perceives only the lowest frequency. The other frequencies always resonate as overtones and determine the timbre, resulting in the difference between different vocal parts and various musical instruments. If the first overtone is used, it is always twice the frequency of the fundamental. If man hears a second tone, the fundamental of which vibrates at this double frequency, then they sound at a distance of 1 octave, and these two tones are considered by humans to be extremely similar. Harmonious sounds or tones, which become music for humans, are created by the brain performing an enormous amount of analysis, namely by effortlessly assigning a complicated mixture of harmonic sound waves or sound oscillations to individual instruments and voices, and recognizing musical motifs and phrases in them. The different areas of the entire brain work together so that a specific music center is not responsible for the relevant performance. However, the whole thing does not only result after the birth, because effectively this happens already very early in the womb, namely already from the 21st day after the conception, if the embryo is begeested by the intruding or reincarnating spirit form. Already as an embryo, The growing brain of a child in the womb can classify music, as well as other sounds, tones, and noises, from the outside as well as from the inside, whereby it can even create musical tones itself. Consequently, it is completely normal for a child to start humming harmoniously shortly after birth, even in the form of melodies which it has already absorbed from the outside into its brain and memory as an embryo, as a fetus, or as an infant, growing up effectively in the womb. Which music will predominate in the child or in adolescence or adulthood depends on the one hand on what was imparted to him by the mother in the womb, but on the other hand also on many other factors, such as education, the environment, the thought-feel-psych, mental consciousness world, the circle of acquaintances and friends, the direction of work, training, the form of society and membership in groups and organizations, a religion or sect. The intuition for music is shared by all people, except those who suffer from rare neurological diseases, and therefore every human being is basically musical. However, it should be noted that those people who have a neurologically disturbed relationship to the harmony of music, and as a result, because brain physiological damage factors are present, cannot evaluate harmonic sounds and tones as such. They are subsequently attached to disharmony and followers of disharmonious noises, wild roaring, howling, which they consider to be singing, banging, nerve-wracking discord and harmonic discrepancy, etc. Music has a very big influence on the human brain. Therefore, for example, cheerful pieces of music, a concert, or a dance style reduce the concentration of the stress hormone cortisol in the blood. The use of music as medicine can have very good effects, for example, after a stroke or brain trauma. Through music, movements can be coordinated again, and with tinnitus, specially processed music can make the noises in the ears disappear again. Aggression, Alzheimer's, or other dementias, as well as behavioral disorders, can be alleviated by special harmonic music and singing together, but relevant music can also bring back memories. Harmonic music of all kinds can give life an emotional hold again, make life easier or bearable. And when people are constantly sprinkled with harmonious music, such as at work, this contributes to a much greater willingness to work, stamina, and performance. So man is closely interwoven with harmonic music because it gives him an emotional core that remains in him even when certain parts of his personality are already damaged and his memories become weaker. The fact is that harmonic music, which can be classical, pop, or folk, etc., but never disharmonic according to unmusical noises and dissonances, etc., has a shaping effect on brain structures. Harmonic music even creates a promotion of intelligence, contrary to the stupid and false assertion of terrestrial psychology that intelligence is not changeable and not expandable. With harmonic music, man can improve his mental, emotional, psychological world as well as other functions, whereby he only has to choose the right music and devote himself to it. In this way, everyone can do a certain amount of self-treatment if they allow themselves to be sprinkled with the harmonious music that is right for them during the course of the day, at work and in their leisure time. But this only works effectively with good harmonic music, which can be classical, pop or folk, as well as harmonic pop, metal sound, and jazz, etc., but not with the already mentioned disharmony of negative noises, banging, howling and roaring, etc. Music affects the hypothalamus via the auditory nerves, influences vegetative functions, and causes a complete exchange with cognitive levels of the brain, because listening to music causes vegetative changes. Basically, listening to music can be based on 8 different aspects, with the following effects occurring. 1. Associative listening to music. The activity of consciousness is more intense. 2. Sentimental listening to music, memories, triggering thought-feeling emotions. 3. Compensatory listening to music, controlling the mood. 4. Motor listening to music, triggers body movements. Vegetative listening to music. Conceptual thinking hardly plays a role, but the music is reduced to pure physicality, dull stomach feeling, goosebumps, shivers, etc. 6. Emotional listening to music. Body excitation is perceived semantically, specifically as fear, joy, grief, etc. 7. Distancing or structural listening to music, consciously following the music through, distancing, contemplative, submerging music. 8. Diffuse listening to music. Distance from the music, music is perceived as disturbing. Music can trigger many different forms of behavior, as was explained at the beginning of this article, and can therefore trigger a wide variety of positive or negative actions and behavior depending on the type of harmonic music or disharmonic sound. In a very positive way, harmonic music can have an extremely mood-lifting effect on the psychic world of thoughts and feelings, and thus even as a means of systematically treating and remedying depressions, if the right music is chosen that appeals to the person. Similar to a painkiller, Mozart music, for example, can work against headaches, while another composition, which makes one day painless or happy, causes pain or sadness the next day, depending on the moral condition. Music can also help well with severe psychosomatic symptoms as well as in psychiatry, because the mental, emotional, and emotional effects of music are particularly useful for suffering people. Furthermore, harmonic music is a strong means to challenge people emotionally in a variety of ways, because through it, the inner defense becomes permeable, which is basically more or less given to every person for various things. Through good, harmonious music of any kind, unpleasant or pleasant thoughts and feelings as well as emotions can be perceived, dissolved, and switched off, built up, and permitted. Through good harmonic music, and it is really only good and harmonic music that is meant, not only thoughts, feelings, and emotions can be conveyed to people, but also a comprehensive communication can be achieved without words and actions. And this is possible both among people who cannot speak, but who are also not able to communicate linguistically because they speak another language. The same is true if such therapies are carried out, with regard to music therapies for sufferings and diseases, as well as for dementia and even for people in a vegetative state. A lack of communication can be extended by good music and can help in the physical, psychological, and conscious development of people, both young children and adolescents and adults. Also, through good and harmonious sounds, deficits of many thought-feel-psych mental moderate forms can be compensated, as well as in disorders of mother-child relationships something is stimulated, which was neglected early in the development of the child and normally already from the pregnancy, but latest after the birth by the mother should be carried out. The fact is, however, that music has always strengthened people's thoughts and feelings of togetherness and continues to do so in the future. Already very early hominids made music together, by rough singing and by rhythmic knocking on hollow fruits, pieces of wood, bones and stones, etc., even if this is not known by earthly researchers and scientists. Like paleontologists, etc., they also performed dances, which made them happy and strengthened their social structures, and also led to a dopamine release in the brain.
What today's youth and even many adults afford today as music is catastrophic and has nothing to do with good, harmonic, and music at all anymore. It is no more than an explosive that numbs the ears and poisons the consciousness, as well as the thought-feeling psycho world, and even makes the body ill. And if the whole thing is seen from a clear point of view, then there is the evil intention behind it, not only to bring about the end of good, harmonious and valuable music, but also to destroy the entire traditional Occidental culture, such as the valuable interpersonal relationships and the general social context of the people of the Western world. The Western man is downright stultified and made extremely aggressive by, as you said, unmusical, resounding and disease-causing noises, by howling, whining, and smashing, which is madly called and understood as music. It's not only ghastly pop and catastrophically bad heavy metal music, lousy hits, but also new jazz, etc., which makes the good harmonic music sink into the sidelines, like good classical music, hits, good pop, rock, and good metal, as well as folk music, etc. And not only humans suffer from all that is unmusical, but also animals and birds, etc., which become ill and disturbed by the unmusical noises, the roaring, howling, and roaring, etc. Like humans, they react accordingly to the nerve-killing and health-damaging riots and the discord of unmusic, which, in relation to humans, have a very damaging effect on their intelligence, thoughts, feelings, and psyche, as well as a negative effect on their consciousness and a destructive effect on their social behavior. In addition, hard, aggressive unmusic not only weakens the learning ability of humans, animals, and mammals, but it also slowly and continuously disturbs and destroys social behavior in every respect, especially in relation to those people who are not particularly blessed with intelligence. And these are exactly those who do not understand that the riot and racket that thunders out into the country from the abused instruments, like the verbal garbage that swells from the mouths of the roaring, howling, yelling, and screaming unmusicians, drives fellow men and the world of all forms of fauna life to madness. This is completely in contrast to good, harmonic, and valuable music of any kind, which delights those people's senses and psyche, who are significantly more developed and sensitive beings, and who have progressed further in their lives in intelligence and social terms than the unmusicians of any kind. The unmusicians are stupid and drive people into dullness through their disharmonic unmusic and make them submissive to foreign influences. The knowledge of the might of the music is very old and was already described early on in various writings, and so the good and harmonious might of the music had already influenced the antique advanced civilizations, brought their civilizations to arise, however, also sealed again their decline and their extinction, as well as their disappearance from the scene, when the might of the discords of the unmusical unmusic arose and brought wars as well as depravity of the human beings and destruction, etc. It is also written in the Bible that in biblical times the Israelites are said to have brought down the walls of Jericho by the sound of trumpets, which only corresponds to a religious fable, but proves that music has been ascribed power in various areas since time immemorial. Much older, however, are the writings of the Indian Vedas, which deal with the power and effect of music on human beings, as described by the philosophers and physicians of ancient Greece, and which have already used certain sounds, keys, and music to combat psychological disorders. Also, diverse old philosophers, like for example Confucius, have taught, and also said about the power of music and its manifold influence on people in general, and on society in particular, why the various forms of good and harmonic music have had different effects on people's intelligence since time immemorial, promote it and refine and evolutionize the thoughts, feelings, psyche, and consciousness, or that in the case of unmusic and missing as well as their sounding noise, buttering, howling, and howling, everything degenerates to the contrary in a malicious and damaging way. Contrary to healing through good, harmonic music, as your father Svath has already explained to me, which I still remember well. Even educated people can be transformed into almost mindless, stupid people through dull, disharmonic music. And this would be the case in the years to come when, from the 1970s and 1980s onwards, such unmusic would emerge and spread within a few years, and as a result, many people would become unworldly, socially poor, and in a vicious form, completely unrelated to all values relating to their fellow human beings and humanity, as well as helpfulness, living together, and life itself, which would even lead to the value of one's own life being disregarded and trampled underfoot. But your father also said at that time that the structure and norms of society would break apart as a result of the emerging unmusic, as well as that mammon and money would take absolutely uncontrollable forms with regard to people's greed and would cause an enormous amount of disaster in the form of bankruptcies, corporate collapses, wars, family destruction, terrorism and sectarianism, disputes, murders, and innumerable other forms of degeneration. I want to say what Svath has explained to me further, such as that certain unmusic in the brain and body, as well as in the psyche and consciousness of humans, causes serious damage to health, which also affects blood pressure and pulse in the heart, which can even cause a heart attack. The rhythm of the drums alone, your father explained, can damage or at least weaken the organism, not only in humans, but also in animals, all animals, birds, amphibians, reptiles, etc. Even a very specific rhythm of very extremely bad unmusic, which would be used frequently in the future from the 1970s and 1980s onwards, would cause special degenerating behavior patterns and health damage in people. The whole thing of miserable unmusic demolishes the mental, emotional, psychological world of all those people who are manipulated and thus have a direct influence on society and change it in an abysmally negative way. And that more and more crime and crimes are emerging from everything, up to increased murder and suicide rates, increased sex crimes and family tragedies, acts of terrorism and war, etc., as Svath said, that actually proves itself with everything that is happening today. But what I would like to say in relation to music, music also settles informatively in the water. As the Japanese researcher Masaru Emoto proved, who played distilled water with different music in the order of Mozart's Symphony No. 40, Bach's Goldberg variations, as well as Japanese pop songs and heavy metal music, then let it freeze, and then photographed the beautiful water crystals created by the musical vibrations. So water and music have a much closer relationship than people generally know. Also that low forms of life are musical, such as jellyfish, is usually not included in human general knowledge. Nor is it the case that whales are singing creatures, and do a lot for Earth with their singing that swings far through the oceans. There is a lot more to be said about how good, harmonious, and therefore right musical sounds stimulate plants and promote their growth. But how unpleasant. Disharmonic music has a very negative effect on plants, amphibians, animals, reptiles, and birds, and how they are also damaged physically and psychologically by general disharmony in their environment.
Contact Report 650.
You can say that. But on the other hand, there were also genetically manipulated refugees from the Sirius regions among the immigrants from the Nacademian descendants, as well as fallible, that is to say, delinquents of the home planets, who preferred, instead of being sent into exile, which was applied in the most drastic and severe manner, to emigrate with such emigration powers and at liberty to teach early humans in the manufacture of various kinds of products, such as tools and hunting weapons, clothing and food containers, etc. Primitive art, music, and all kinds of knowledge were also taught to early man by these immigrants, as well as knowledge concerning the heavenly bodies, medicine concerning medicinal plants, etc., and the use of fire, etc.
So the whole thing was not easy, but therefore the actual creators of all progressive inventions of the early humans were to be led back to the immigrants of the Nacademian descendants peoples. And this was the only reason why the humanity of today, which emerged from the early humans, could develop so drastically fast, and as far as is the case today with regard to electronics, inventions, craftsmanship, art, medicine, music and technology, etc., and so on. In principle, it would not have been possible without the direct immigrants from the Nacademian peoples and without their distant descendants and all their teachings, as well as also without your apparatus impulse hypnotic influence of the descendants of the extraterrestrial immigrants that earthly mankind could develop so rapidly and to a large extent up to the today's conditions.